Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.
Hi folks, welcome back to Through a Scottish Prism. I hope you and yours are well. It's been another heck of a week in Scottish, British and global politics. Lots to talk about, lots of it affecting us. So let's not hang about in case the gremlins arrive that I had last week. We'll start with, we've got our favourite lawyer up in Clickmannon, our Eva, in you come. How you doing, Eva?
Hi Roddy, another hectic week and it's all go, but everything to play for in a Scottish context, we hope.
Absolutely. Down there in Old Ricky, we've got Lloyd Quinnan, our favourite weatherman.
Hello, how are you all? My button was a bit sticky there.
Yeah, usually a wee bit stressed. And up there in the City of Discovery, we have Mr. Petrie.
Hi, Roddy.
How you doing, mate?
How you all doing?
You doing well?
Yeah, everything's going fine here.
Excellent. And Mr. Boswell, the Coatbridge Cavalier himself, don't know where he is. Where are you? On mute. Wish me a quid. Great.
I forgot to put that mute on with all the shenanigans early on. Aye, over in Brussels, back there after a bit of time in the States, and I'm doing a wee bit of scooting about, so I'll be floating about. I should be somewhere, maybe somewhere interesting on Friday. Let's see. Next week, sorry. Let's see. Who knows? It's great.
Well, it's been a heck of a start to the week, Eva, and I don't know, there's so many things I want to start with, but I really don't know which the best one to go with. But I'm thinking that was the admission by Nicola Sturgeon that she couldn't have done any more, that everything that she had done to get independence was done and there was no more that could be done. What did you make of that statement?
I was expecting her to come out with the details of her secret plan, but she's obviously confirmed she never had a secret plan. Who would have thunk it? But you know what she's become? She has been to the independence movement what Margaret Thatcher was to the coal mining industry, anathema. And the pure cheek of the woman. How many front pages of the National did we see where she promised a referendum would be along in a jiffy? There you go, over and over and over again. There was going to be a referendum, there was going to be a constitutional convention, no ifs, no buts, get the date in your diary. You know, innumerable times she promised it. And now we know it's the Wizard of Oz. There was nothing behind the curtain. Just a daft wee lassie that made all the mistakes and ran away and left everybody else to carry the can. You know, that government that she's responsible for, that absolute lacking in competency, questionable integrity on the part of so many of them, utter nincompoops in innumerable ways. You know, you saw this week that Michael Matheson was complaining that people had made too much of his fiddling with the 11 grand for the iPad charges, as if it was the public's fault that folk were up in arms about it, when the fact is he lied. You've also seen folks saying they feel sorry for Neil Gray because he got caught out using the government limousines to go and watch his favourite football team. You know, that the worm has turned, the penny has flipped. We have to feel sorry for the politicians because that is the culture that Nicola Sturgeon created in Scotland. Before her, we had people like Henry McLeish falling on his sword. Was it a fiddle or a muddle or a fiddle or whatever it was for a few £1,000s? We had Wendy Alexander jacking it for a couple of £100. We had David McCletchy in a taxi. These people from unionist parties left because they were caught out doing something that was somehow not quite right. But actually, it was nowhere near as bad as what Nicola Sturgeon's cabal have done to Scottish politics. And the fact that it's nationalist politicians that have made such a mire, you know, and just absolute mockery of politics, and where's the integrity, where's the honesty, where's the decency? It's gone south, and it is such a very, very bad look for our movement, and it's down to her, that daft wee lassie for Irvine. It's absolutely on her, and by God, I hope she's no intending to make a return, and if she is, Scotland will rue the day.
It sure will. It sure will. But that's the thing, Lloyd. You know, she said, well, there's no more I could have done. Well, she could have, on the day that David Cameron declared evil, she could have said, remove that, or we're going to collapse the Hollywood Parliament, and we're going to call it an independence election. She could have done that at any time throughout her tenure in her 10 years. She could have said, no, we're declaring UDI, and we're going to do it, and we're going to get it okayed by the Scottish people by having a Scottish parliamentary election with that as the sole thing. There is so much she could have done. So to say that she did all that was possible, absolute balderdash.
Yes, it is. But I think what I find most extraordinary about her statement was this is the first time in a very, very long time that Mrs. Murrow, Nicola Sturgeon, the former First Minister, has admitted that she's fallible. That, you know, she has never admitted before that she's been wrong. She's never admitted before she didn't have the answer. And really, when it comes right down to it, it's an admission of failure. It's an admission of failure on two levels. Number one, if you put yourself forward to be the leader of the Scottish National Party and therefore effectively the de facto leader of the independence movement in Scotland, then you better have a plan for achieving that independence, because if you don't, then you have failed and you should never have applied for the job in the first place. Secondly, she failed as First Minister of our country. Again, a job that she wanted, she took, and utterly and completely failed. I mean, and one of the greatest failures of all is she created a culture whereby Neil Gray and Michael Matheson can say that they're sorry, that effectively they were corrupt. They appropriated funds and they appropriated services from the people of Scotland for their own individual benefit. But both of those men know the Machiavellian structures, behaviours and conspiracy that the former First Minister, who's admitted her failures, that she carried out. Now, if they know that, if they know there is this dark, dark secret that there are lies being told, well, why not? Why not tell lies about their own circumstances? So, of course, Michael never watched the football. Of course, Neil was having very important ministerial meetings at half-time at Aberdeen games. Of course, all of this was true, because everything Nicola Sturgeon said was true. But the one thing that she's failed to say is that there are many ways in which she could have progressed the cause of independence. First of all, in fact, things that the current First Minister, John Swinney, could do today or tomorrow, which is collapse the Parliament and have a Scottish, an emergency, not an emergency, but have an extraordinary election for the Scottish Parliament on the basis of the maximum number of votes and the maximum number of seats. We begin negotiations for our independence and we bring the United Nations in. That's one way she could do it. Secondly, she could have, and indeed the current First Minister could, actually start a campaign for independence, outlining to the people the benefits of independence. Now, the major problem they have there, of course, is they've signed up to the free ports deal and the special economic zone deal, which means that independence is considerably further down the road than most of our people, certainly those who support independence and are members of the Scottish National Party, are aware of, because our politicians refuse to talk about these issues. But the fact still remains. The failures of Nicola Sturgeon are being visited upon the people again by the failures of John Swinney to take the actions that Nicola Sturgeon could have taken when First Minister, by collapsing the Parliament, having a de facto referendum election, or indeed starting a campaign for independence. More importantly than that, announcing a Scotland united approach to each and every election in future, whereby the Scottish National Party assumes its correct position as the principal element of the national movement, but sees itself very firmly uniting with all the other elements of the national movement to deliver independence at the first possible opportunity. She could have done it. John can do that now. But again, I go back to certain little elements of what I mentioned, particularly, very particularly, the Freeport situation. Why is it that our politicians are refusing to speak to people about what, when they speak to the media, they say is this great economic opportunity that will bring, you know, bounty to the country and a land of milk and honey for our people? Why are they refusing to talk about that? I don't understand this. But back to Miss Sturgeon and the final word on Miss Sturgeon. She failed as a First Minister. She's currently failing in her PR attempt to rehabilitate herself. The fact of the matter is, even we are now culpable for maintaining her profile. And the reason that she needs to be talking, she needs to be on the front pages of the paper, is because of her narcissism, and we mustn't indulge it anymore. Like Henry McLeish, like Jack McConnell, like Donald Dewar, like Wendy Alexander, she is a former First Minister and a former politician. And that's the way she should be treated. She had her go, she failed, by her own admission. She failed on 2 counts, to run the country well and to deliver independence. We should speak no more of her, no more.
Yeah. She, of course, she has a book to sell, so that's why she keeps trying to put herself into the limelight. But on the question of, you know, the SNP could be telling the people about independence and laying out that case. Well, no, they can't, Phil, because one of the deals that they did, the SNP, to get their budget through was a deal with the British Liberal Democratic Party, that there was no money to be spent on no promotion of independence, or the very raison d'etre, allegedly, of the SNP they sacrificed to put through a devolved Parliament budget. Instead of saying, you're not going to back the budget, well, I'll tell you what, we're having an independence referendum as through the Holyrood election. That's what we're going to do. That's the reality. This, you know, what Sturgeon's saying she couldn't think of any other ways. We've already come up with half a dozen, and we're only 20 minutes into the programme.
Oh, it's nuts. I mean, as Stu in Wings Over Scotland illustrates, he's got an article, short one, freedom of choice. The SNP did not have to do this. Labour had already announced their intention to abstain. There was no danger of the budget being defeated, so the SNP could have allocated however much money they wanted from their increased funding to the pursuit of independence. So what does it mean? Well, that's a rhetorical question, obviously. The SNP are currently not the party of independence, and that's what it was created for. And it was right, it did. That's what it was created for, and it did represent independence, right up to Nicola Sturgeon took the wheel. As soon as she was given the keys of a free Scotland, potential free Scotland from Alex, she put them up for sale. As long as she was the main focus, she was happy. She made no progress in independent Scotland, and instead she has rendered SNP not only ineffective as a party, but now it's the tool in the British establishment's armoury for the disruption of the independence movement. That's what the SNP is right now. And you talk about, you listed a few things. Sturgeon, I couldn't have done things differently or any better, really. She said her biggest mistake was the big infrastructure failures like the ferries. But that's not true. Her biggest failure was removing the SNP's focus from independence to her pet causes and issues that undermine the unification of the Scottish independence movement. That's what the British establishment fear, and that's her biggest crime. This arrogant little woman put herself and her career before the cause. And I don't care who you are, but you should know that when we say the cause, the prime directive is independence and nothing less, because it's the only way Scotland and its people can free itself from the corrupt injustice that is this British state. I mean, the list of mistakes, we touched on a few. Well, walking away from independence, this is without doubt the biggest mistake. And it should mean she's never again involved in Scottish politics, other than perhaps joining Labour, Tory, or any of the other imperialist devolutionists, because she's shown these to be her true colours. It's as simple as that. And this continues. Read Robin McAlpine's article. The SNP is about to become unreformable. It was just ended 22nd of January in Stuart Campbell did the same. The silent revolution echoed it. Very soon, the only way that an SNP leader can be removed will be death or standing down. Her mistakes, pandemic. She milked the daily televised control and diktats, used it as personal promotional tool. Ferries, a disaster from the start, wrong solution. We know this because Australian-based marine architect and ferry expert Stuart Ballantyne was on the Prism show and explained he presented the solution for free, but nah, we Nicola knew best. Of course you did. Vows and pledges. Vow to scrap all charges for care and support. National Care Service was abandoned. Vow to give every Scottish child a laptop. No, didn't happen. 10%, then it was binned. Vow to go ahead with an in-person policy. Dumped. Vows to be the most accurate First Minister ever. No monthly Facebook QAs, no regular town halls. And we, as the MPs, found her difficult to contact. Never mind engage with. Never mind the people. How's that? That's not how it's supposed to work. London, you can't get access to. Edinburgh, the whole point is accessibility for the people of Scotland, and she failed there as well. Vow to moral, well, in her marriage, well, that's a bit cruel, but he's under the bus now anyway, but that was inevitable. Pledges to press on with a free, fresh independence referendum. This is over 7 years old, this promise. Didn't happen. Pledge for Scotland to vote to remain in the EU was respected. No, Nicola and Ian Blackford were still out of Europe. Pledge on big campaign to produce an independent Scotland, a household guide to be delivered to 2.4 million homes. Didn't happen. Gender Recognition Reform Act. Promises. It didn't happen. You know? And then the SNP to re-establish a not-for-profit public renewable energy company by the end of the Parliament never got off the ground. Sturgeon to host refugees at home, didn't yet. Listen, I did a wee bit of research. The list goes on and on and on. We could just read it for the rest of the programme. But the significant thing here, contrast all this with Alex Salmond's achievements and the Scottish National Party when it was truly a party of independence. These shysters need removed and permanently from Scottish politics.
Yeah, the one you missed out was the Constitutional Convention. That was another big promise, Alan. She was in January the 31st, 2020. I remember it well. It's the day I left the party. She then promised we would have a Constitutional Convention. Never happened as well. The things she says she couldn't do, we've learned, I don't know how many Phil got us up to, but there's so much more she could have done.
Yeah, I mean, words are important. I mean, she said she couldn't do anything more. Now, there's only two ways that you couldn't do something, and that is if you're incompetent or you're an agent of the state. Now, I'll leave that up to the viewers to decide which one they think she is. Well, if we look at the evidence, 2015, the SNP got all but 3 seats in Westminster. What a majority that is. Unprecedented majority. And what did they do? Did they send Blackford down there to say, we are here to say goodbye. We are heading back to Scotland to reconvene the independent Scottish Parliament that has been in recess since 1707? No, they didn't. They sent Tommy Shepherd to grovel at the feet of the colonial Speaker of the House to say, we have not come here to push independence. We have come here to be good parliamentarians. Then 2017, they didn't go into an election fighting on independence. They went onto an election to try and overturn the democratic vote of England to take their nation out of the European Union. As a result, we lost a number of good MPs. Then 2009, same thing. We got another majority. 3 elections at Westminster, we got an election majority. Then we're going to 2021. We had a great chance of having a supermajority in the Scottish Parliament. Instead, Sturgeon put her power and her party before the people of this country. We got an independence majority, but it was very slim. All these elections showed a majority in the sovereign will of the Scottish people. What Sturgeon could have done then was go to the United Nations and said, our people have made their views well known. We wish to now go through the process of self-determination. She could have also set up committee meetings with other former colonies to try and get them to come onto our argument and push our fight for independence into the United Nations. She could have applied for observer status of the United Nations. There's lots of things that she could have done. She could have organised the Independence Convention, organised street rallies, civil disobedience, but instead she bowed the knees to the Westminster Parliament. Now, just think about this. We have pensioners who are freezing in their homes. We have children who are going to school hungry. We have disabled people who are being shown no respect and living without dignity. We have our sick being treated in hospitals that are underfunded and not well run. That shouldn't have happened. We should have been independent, and every single one of those problems would have been fixed now.
Yeah, absolutely right. But to compound things with the SNP, Eva, last week we were talking about Stewart McDonald, the towel folder, the holiday rep, who was suggesting that the SNP should think about a coalition with the Liberal Party. This week he wrote for the very unionist Spectator an article where he said that the SNP should have a pact with the Labour Party, the British Labour Party in Scotland, no less. That's what the goal should be for the 26th, not independence, not uniting the independence movement, but uniting the British Labour Party with the, I don't know what we call them now, the National Party, because they're not a Scottish National Party if they want to truck with the British Party. And the following day, as if we're being softened up, Jeanne Freeman, the ex-health secretary, she was saying, she is sympathetic towards that coalition between the SNP and Labour. Are they softening us up for a coalition with the British Labour Party? Is this the big sellout coming?
Absolutely. Stuart Campbell predicted this a couple of years ago, and as usually was spot on. And, this goes back to the days of Edward, the Hammer of the Scots. The problem with the Scots that he laughed at, and they've been laughing at us ever since, is that the independence movement is signally incapable of uniting itself. And that's because we are currently being led by half-wits whose priorities are not the priorities of the people of Scotland. Alan's just outlined the problems that face our country. Our people are cold, they're hungry, they're ill, they're not being properly educated, and there are difficulties within every aspect of public services. And that is down to having had very poor government, and it will change and only change radically when we have the control of our own purse strings. Now, in 1992, I was elected an SNP councillor in Clackmannanshire. There were 12 councillors in Clackmannanshire then, 3 SNP, 8 Labour and 1 Tory. There were discussions occasionally about things that were best for the community where party politics didn't enter into it, and you looked at doing what was best for your local people. But in the context of the Scottish Parliament, the SNP's raison d'etre is to achieve independence, and the SNP ought to be talking about coalitions with other independence supporting politicians, whether from the ISP or ALBA or Indie for Indie. The fact that they're talking, and they're obviously talking behind closed doors at the moment between themselves about the potential for a coalition come 2026. The fact that they're talking about it, we're not being softened up. It's a fait accompli. It will happen because they'll be doing their best to keep the real independent supporters out, and they'll be trying to keep reform out. And the way to do that is to be in a pact with Labour, because they're basically, the SNP and Labour are now two cheeks of the backside that used to be Labour and Tory. There is no difference. And what the SNP are doing is they're compounding all the errors, all the mistakes that are being made brutally by Starmer's government, from the winter fuel payment, maintaining the bedroom tax, maintaining the two-child rape clause. These are serious issues. People in Scotland don't need these to be there. They need a government that is led by those who have principles, who want to make Scotland a better place for everybody, who understand that the only way to do that is for Scotland to set its own priorities and not to be wagged and cajoled and beaten down by Westminster policies and by Westminster-based parties. Alan says this every week, and he's right. There is no such thing as Scottish Labour. Labour is a unionist party. The union is anathema to the best interests of the people of Scotland. The best thing for the people of Scotland is independence. We will not achieve independence if the SNP are in cahoots with Labour, because what we'll see forevermore is Devo or Devo Max. We will continue to be made a laughing stock of on an international stage, and people like Edward the Hammer of the Scots will be laughing at us again, saying, look at that, they fell for it once again.
Yeah, that's what he said. Was it Daniel Defoe said they'll invite, after the union will invite down Scots to laugh at them, and that's what's been happening. But to compound this with Stewart McDonald, Lloyd, and Jeanne Freeman trying to soften us up about a wee deal with Labour, we've also got Johnny Boy, Honest John, signing a deal here with the City of London Spivs. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, I've never known of a deal that we've done with London where we get the best side of the bargain. You know, we don't even get the full details of this, but it's another sellout of Scottish assets to the English.
Yeah, Roddy, the most important thing about this is, if you think back, Alex Salmond would never have even entered the room, never mind considered signing a paper with what effectively is a local authority. You're the First Minister of Scotland, John. You aspire to be the First Minister of an independent country. You aspire, surely, to be that guy in UN Plaza when the flag comes down between the flag of Saudi Arabia and Senegal. So why can you explain to me, John, why did you get into a room with three people who effectively were elected by under 1,200 people? They're not even a proper local authority within London. They are the City of London. They're something completely different. They are the ones who have representation unelected in the House of Commons, right beside the Speaker's chair, there to protect all the interests of Lloyd's of London and indeed the Stock Exchange, and that's their function and purpose. They also have more power than each and every individual member of Parliament, in as much as they have the ability to prevent legislation, not to stop legislation, not to veto legislation, but to prevent if it threatens the essential needs of the City of London. What is the leader of a country doing talking to a minor council of a conurbation somewhere in another foreign country? It's the legitimisation of British structures. John doesn't understand the concept of sovereignty clearly, because what he just did is he shared our sovereignty, or gave away our sovereignty, to someone who couldn't enter into the same agreement with anybody else on the planet. This was subservience of the highest order. But you know, that's one thing. Let's get back to the other two. Jeanne Freeman. Jeanne Freeman, who decided when things started to get a bit hot in the kitchen, particularly post-COVID, when, remember, Jeanne Freeman was the health minister. But she decided that, oh, it was all too tough, it was all too terrible. I'm going to retire now and go away quietly into the night. No, she's not. She's away doing what she's been doing for years and years, since she left the Communist Party and joined the Labour Party, and then became an essential part of the Labour minor nobility under Jack McConnell, her and her partner being part of that great Scottish introduction to Washington politics. The part that Jeanne Freeman played during COVID, and the part that Jeanne Freeman has played in the corruption and the destruction of the focus on independence within the Scottish National Party, is something that I'm sure historians will look at in the future. Maybe we should look at it a bit closer as well. As for Stewart McDonald is a streetwise laddie. Of that, there's no question. What he spotted once he got himself down to Westminster was that there's a gravy train where you don't have to actually put yourself in front of the electorate and run the risk of not being on the gravy train anymore. And that's called working for the British state. And that's effectively what Stewart's doing. You know, how many holiday reps have you met on 18 to 30 or nowadays on Saga holidays that immediately get a column in the Spectator when they cease handing out towels, you know? Stewart McDonald he's a useful idiot, and he knows that. But he's a useful idiot with a very fat bank account. And so long as that's the case, Stewart McDonald will do what's necessary to do the job that he has, which is to disrupt and cause division within the national movement. That's all there is to it. But unfortunately, these are the very people that person that I wasn't going to mention ever again, these are the very people that she chose, that she went out and headhunted and forced in to being elected by members of the Scottish National Party. These people are a product of one person and one person only, and that is the corrupt former First Minister, Mrs. Nicola Murrell.
Phil, what do you make of it? Stewart McDonald and Jeanne Freeman talking about doing deals. John signing up with the City of London. It's quite worrying.
Yeah, well, there've obviously a couple of points there from Lloyd. She who shall not be named. Maybe that should be how we proceed in terms of she who should not be named. And the remembrancer, of course, sits in the Parliament's both houses, I believe. One of the City of London's chief corporate, it's the corporations officer, and it goes back to the 16th century. You know, the channel of communications, the ear of the Parliament, both houses, and a conduit between what the city wants and what the city wants the city gets. And he's one of the tools that's used there. So that's the guy you're talking about. The story here with John Swinney was to support the country's, allegedly to support the country's financial industry. Scotland's First Minister and the City of London have inked a new deal, one of the headlines went, and in order to secure investment in Scotland. The usual garbage, the usual blab that they come out with, or create new technology, fund nature initiatives, and promote the Scottish financial sector globally. My arse. It's rubbish, John. You're lying through your teeth. The reality is that the UK and the City in London are not our friends. They continue to asset strip and undermine anything Scotland does. And remember, the Scotland's financial service sector is more about long-term investments and insurance. It's more than 2,000 businesses. There's 77,000 employees. Its success is thanks to a combination of innovation, talent and technology, which has attracted global names to both the financial sectors and the fintech industries. We are doing well, and our investments are more about long-term investments, steady investments. You want the flash Harrys and the big money, you go down to London, the flash in the pan guys with the big bucks are made, and the most of the shysterism is down in London. So to sign a deal with these guys, you're undermining your own, John, and it's all show, and you're part of the problem, not the solution. As for Stewart, well, it's already been said, obviously I knew Stewart quite well. I actually got on well with him. He's an engaging fellow, articulate, he's not stupid, but he should be removed. These people need to be removed from the SNP. The Scottish National Party is supposed to be an independence party, and it has been hijacked by self-serving individuals whose laser focus was always on furthering their own careers instead of serving the people who they were elected to present. The Labour are unionists, Stewart and Jeanne. Any talk of a coalition with any unionist party is evidence of corruption. You should be removed, both of you, from SNP and from anything that purports to represent the best interests of the people of Scotland, because the best interest of the people of Scotland is not unification and the union of unequals with the Unionist Labour Party or any other of that ilk. Get together with the rest of the independence movement and do what you were elected to do. You are showing your true colours and you do not belong in the SNP. Either that or change something. Change the people in the lead of the SNP, or change the name to the Scottish Unionist Party, because that's what it's become under these shysters.
Yeah, but that's what it's all about, Alan, isn't it? I mean, the fact is, it seems now, for some time now, under Sturgeon and continuing, the SNP stopped from having its raison d'etre to be independence to winning elections. That's all they'll do, win elections, stay in power. Whether now we're seeing in a coalition or standing alone, that's what they're interested in. It's no longer independence.
It's part and parcel of them becoming a state party. They put their self-interest first. But I mean, the important thing is the City of London is 1.12 square miles of this United Kingdom. Yet it holds approximately 98% of the power. It is free ports on steroids. They could do whatever they want. And let's not forget, they were the invisible backbone behind Better Together. They were the ones getting the businesses to turn round and say that they would move out of Scotland if Scotland went independent. They were doing it sneakily behind the scenes, but they were funding an awful lot of it because they fear Scotland becoming independent, because it will make a massive dent in the power that they have and the finances that they have. And then we'll go on to making deals with Labour. I mean, that's 2 deals that have been made. And it's been the pensioners, the disabled, the children, the workers who are going to be the human sacrifices for these deals with the devils. You go into coalition with the Labour Party. You're going into coalition with someone who wants to remove free prescription charges. They will bring privatisation into the health service. They will totally destroy this country and try to make it as difficult as possible for us to convince people that we need independence. They will destroy our nation. No nationalist party should ever even think about going into coalition with a unionist. And Labour, Tory and Liberal Democrats are all English parties.
Absolutely, we shall hold no truck for them, none whatsoever. Before I go on to the next topic, I want to just tell you all about this, ladies and gentlemen. I don't know if any of you noticed it, but this week, Norway announced that their sovereign wealth fund from their oil revenues has reached such a level that every Norwegian has now the equivalent of $315,000 in that fund. That's what they've got. We, of course, have zero in Scotland. We have more oil than Norway. We have whiskey. Norway doesn't have whiskey. They have salmon. We have salmon. We have so much more. But they've got in their fund 315,000. Because it brings me on nicely to other Rachel in accounts, as Lloyd christened her, had a big financial announcement this week. And she said several things. And I'd like to start with a wee video clip of her where she was interviewed by Laura Kinsberg, no friend of Scottish independence, but she asked a killer question that kind of put her, let Rachel in accounts expose her contempt, her absolute loathing of Scotland. I don't give a shit.
Why are you going to let the Grangemouth refinery in Scotland go to the wall? It's one of the places in the country that could make sustainable air fuel. Nowhere in the UK makes it right now. So why not step in to help there?
We have given money to that local authority, and we are working with the Scottish Government with a growth plan for Grangemouth. It's a very difficult situation that we find ourselves in, but we're working closely with the Scottish Government to support people in that area.
But it's due to close, and then at a later date there'd be fewer and different jobs as it makes a transition to become a different kind of plant, a fuel import depot. Those are skilled jobs in an industry where you could build a new one with sustainable aviation fuel. If you want the economy to grow and to create good jobs, isn't that exactly what you should be doing?
But we need to partner with business to create those good jobs paying decent wages. It's why we've invested, for example, alongside with BP and Equinor in Teesside and Merseyside in carbon capture and storage to support some of our energy intensive industries like ceramics and cement and glass making, to preserve those jobs, to create new jobs in Britain. There are big opportunities as we decarbonise the economy to bring good jobs, given our industrial heritage, whether that's in Scotland and the north of England. And the good thing about these jobs is these are jobs in our former industrial heartlands and in our coastal communities. And we want to work, and we are working with businesses to unlock those jobs and growth opportunities.
Well, those are exactly the kind of jobs that might go in Grangemouth.
Pay decent wages in Teesside, Eva. Our industrial heartlands, Teesside, the north of England, not Scotland. It's just there's just contempt for Scotland.
Absolutely. She always reminds me of Severus Snape, and I wish that she would appear one day with a magic wand, because that's just about what Scotland needs just now. I find this almost unbelievable, because it is absolute contempt for the people of Scotland. It's also contempt for those Labour MPs elected in Scotland, including my own, Brian Leishman. I sat beside him at hustings in Grangemouth, organised by the unions, whereby he promised voting Labour was a guarantee that Grangemouth would stay open. And I have asked Brian Leishman repeatedly where he got that undertaking from, who gave him that undertaking, when did they give the undertaking, and he's refused to reply. So I'm asking him again publicly, Brian, Who told you that Labour would keep Grangemouth open, or did you make that up yourself? Because the people who elected you, in preference to me or to Kenny McCaskill, the greatest voice for Scottish energy that we've ever heard, those people deserve an answer. The shopkeepers who will be affected when Grangemouth closes, all the little businesses that will go to the wall, all the people that will be flung on the dole, all those who will watch their children go and work in the Middle East or think about emigrating to Canada and Australia again, all those people deserve an answer. They deserve honesty. They deserve to know why it is that Scotland is a cash cow, but are dumped as and when it feels like it. You know, there are 5 refineries in England that are all planning to expand when Grangemouth closes. This is not about, you know, zero carbon. It's not about targets for climate change or emissions or whatever the hell it is. This is about the deliberate de-industrialization, the vandalism that is being put upon Scotland. It is being done on purpose. It is scorched earth. It has reduced Scotland to becoming an economic basket case, remove from Scotland its lifeblood, de-industrialise the country, continue the damage and, you know, the death and the destruction that was wrought in the Thatcher years is continuing, and it's accelerating under a Labour government because Keir Starmer doesn't give a flying fig about the people of Scotland. All he wants is to bleed us dry of our resources. And you see no greater proof of that than in the fact that he won't answer his own Labour MPs in Scotland when they ask the questions. There's 3 of them this week have said that they want Grangemouth to be used to produce aviation fuel. He's not answered them. But there's no reason why it should be restricted to that. And there's every reason why it should be used to refine Scotland's oil. There is a tanker of Scotland's oil en route to China at the moment to be refined. That oil has come from the North Sea. It's come via Grangemouth in a tanker going to China to be refined and sold back to us. It's worth, I think, something like £160 million, one tanker load. It's on its way there now because people like Keir Starmer cause and permit that to happen. They're giving money to football stadia. They actually, one of them said during the week that they'll be happy to promote and support a football team in Grangemouth. You know, football is safe in Grangemouth. The refinery jobs, the industrial future of our country is completely unsafe as a result of the union. And John Swinney, we know you watch this. If you wanted one reason only to collapse the Scottish Parliament and have an election, it's Grangemouth. Because otherwise, the Proclaimers and their sons and their daughters are going to be singing about Grangemouth in a couple of generations the way that we sang about all the other places that we lost in the 1980s.
Here, Lloyd, the other thing, this whole thing from Rachel, actually the National captured it perfectly with this headline. There we are. You know, they're going to be investing in Luton Airport, Heathrow Gatwick Airport, the East-West Rail, you know, right through Old Trafford, but nothing. Thames Crossing, it's just everything there. Nothing in Scotland, nothing whatsoever, nothing in Wales. All about England, using Scotland's wealth, incidentally. This has been, when they borrow this money, they'll borrow money to do all these things. We'll get lumped with 8.9% of the debt that they've borrowed to improve England and its infrastructure. And at the same time, they'll say, see what I mean? You're too weak, too poor, and too stupid to be independent because look at your deficit. It's absolute larceny in the open.
Yeah, absolutely. But Roddy, we need to get back to first principles here. Even the way you presented that, you know that this is nonsense. We do not have a deficit. United Kingdom of Great Britain, Northern Ireland has a deficit incurred by the politicians who owe their allegiance to that very structure and the Crown and Parliament. It's nothing to do with us. And when we become independent, any discussions whatsoever of deficit should be met with one word and one word only: reparations. You want to play the reparations game, then we'll play the reparations game too. It's as simple as that. Now, let's get back to the essence of this whole Grangemouth issue, and it's not a today issue. This is the whole of my life issue. How many de-industrialization campaigns have I taken part in my short time on this planet? from the Lee Jeans factory, yeah, the miners' strike, Caterpillar, Gartcosh, Ravenscraig, British Leyland Bathgate, Roots at Johnston, Timex Allen in Dundee. How many times has de-industrialisation happened here? And the Scottish National Party, which at the time barely had councillors, never mind members of Parliament, would be right at the forefront of the campaign to prevent it. Here we are with our most important piece of infrastructure, future infrastructure, is about to close, and where is the leadership of the Scottish National Party? You know, forget the fact they're the Scottish government. Where is the leadership of the Scottish National Party? You know, when Caterpillar was going to move its plant to France, the French workers came out in support of the Caterpillar workers in Uddingston. But who didn't come out in support of them? The Caterpillar factory workers in England who took the jobs from Caterpillar. Now, maybe that's a bonus because it's currently Caterpillar tractors, bulldozers that are tearing up the roads of occupied Palestine at the moment. So maybe that was a bonus for us not having to have Caterpillar here anymore. But the essential thing I'm getting at here is this. If you have de-industrialisation happening in your country and you claim to be the party that believes that an independent Scotland would be beneficial to all of the people of the country and that we would be richer and better off on our own, you do not lie back and have your tummy tickled by the City of London when your major oil refinery in an oil refining country is being closed for the benefit of a certain man called Jim Ratcliffe. Now, this whole business of INEOS, Grangemouth, and the Freeport silence. And again, it comes back to this, and we need to keep talking about this. If our politicians don't want to talk about Grangemouth, and they don't want to talk about Freeports, and Freeports and Grangemouth are inextricably linked because of geography, and indeed INEOS pulling out of Grangemouth. Now, if you were a conspiracy theorist, you would think to yourself, oh, wait a minute here. We've got a refinery that's going to close, but it just happens to be in this soon-to-be deregulated Freeport zone. Is somebody going to come in at the last minute and be the white knight? But it won't be a white knight for Scotland. It'll be a white knight for those investors in, oddly enough, the Canadian Civil Service Pension Fund, who will benefit enormously from our oil refinery within a Freeport, not providing any revenue whatsoever to the exchequer of the country which it's in. Now, who in the right mind would believe, you know, bring an alien from space, hello, this is the leader of this country called Scotland. It's about to have its economic future utterly and completely destroyed, and he thinks this is a good idea. What would the alien say? Get rid of him. The fact is, this is a crisis, an absolute crisis. Our mainstream media are entirely silent. It's somewhat shocking that Laura Kuenssberg is the one who rolled the grenade into the room. You know, Mrs. Tory 2025. But they're the only ones talking about it. Our mainstream media don't even talk about it. It's like they don't understand, or do they understand and they don't want to talk about it. But the greatest crime here is the First Minister of this country and his cabinet, and indeed all of the Parliament, you know, irrespective, be the unionist or be the nationalist, you should be uniting behind any campaign that counters de-industrialisation of the country. It makes sense. But then again, as we talked about in the previous, the previous subject, we're being softened up here. We're being softened up for a Labour SNP coalition, not unlike the Basque National Party and the Spanish Socialist Party in the Basque Country, not like the Catalans with the Spanish Socialist Party in Catalonia as well. If only our politicians would spend a little time looking around the world, seeing the examples of what could be done and what could be done to you. Because the second part, the could be done to you, is the bit that the SNP have done no work on whatsoever since the day and hour the Parliament was opened. And that is a failure.
Here's the other one. One of the things they're trying to put on us, Phil, is this, that they're saying, oh, the third runway at Heathrow is great for Scotland. For after all, you can get your salmon and whisky exported from Heathrow. Why not Prestwick? Why not spend some money in Prestwick and let's put it out at Prestwick? Less cost, less distance to travel. It's got to be more economic, surely. But it is de-industrialization and it's a stealing of assets. That's all it is, pure and simple.
You add it to the list. A very good impromptu list there from Lloyd, but it continues. And we've talked about this many times about what's left for the asset strip. Well, everything you can see. What will be left? Living in a tent city? Is that what we're going to be? Because that's where we're headed. You know, Rachel from Accounts, the Labour Party, the Tories, Reform, Lib Dems are good news for Scottish independence, and the SNP are now the only and major obstacle to independence for Scotland. They're taking the absolute piss. And even those who have failed to see what's going on to date, will they be now forced to see? Well, there are none so blind as those who refuse to see. But Heathrow's third runway, she says it can be built and operated in a decade. This is Rachel from Accounts. Now, I've built a few airports. What does Rachel from Accounts know about airports? Well, I don't know. She's repeating what she's been told. But she wants spades in the ground by 20 and use the runway with 2025s. Teak Grand's against it. I'll be honest, that we need better connectivity. I'm for better connectivity, but for Scotland, not for England. And note, when you export goods from a British port, you're allowed, it enables you to fudge the books and show that these exports are actually English and not Scottish. So this opportunity is not lost upon the Unionists. That I mean, look at Bell's whiskey with the Union Jack on it. Don't buy it. Scottish, you know, the best product of British salmon from Scotland. Just if it's got a jack, put it back, because this is what this is all about. No money for the Grangemouth. Yeah, that was a good one. Grangemouth and free ports go hand in hand. Absolutely agree. We must ensure everybody knows this. The aviation fuel issue. Rachel from Accounts is an idiot on this, talking about green energy, zero carbon. It's newspeak, as is all this net zero bollocks. She spoke of carbon capture and storage, CCS and Teesside. I just happened to have been the contracts manager for Shell on a carbon capture and storage. It was a £1 billion initiative between White Rose and Yorkshire, and what we were going to do in Scotland. We moved it to St Fergus, a gas-fired plant. We had the best system. The best system in carbon capture and storage was, we had the production facilities in Fergus. We were going to use Lungannet, but somebody closed it. Screws, another one to add to the list. And anyway, I'll cut this long story short, but we have the best system. We have the production, a redundant pipeline out of Goldeneye, and we can bury this stuff in the ground. It is the best, most efficient way to do it, and it get bumped, even though with the best solution for the English solution she's now talking about. In fact, if you want to understand it, read Lord Oxborough's report from 2016, carbon capture and storage, the best solution for Britain, and net zero and all that crap. Anyway, I was one of the co-authors of this report that's substantial and written and just shows that this idiot has no idea what she's talking about. But anyway, as usual, Scotland taking advantage of, and we need to ensure that folk who live and work in Scotland get this message and understand it. And another one, they've got money for Old Trafford to rebuild 600 million, but a new refinery in Belgium is Ratcliffe's mission, not to save Grangemouth. So asset stripping, and not just Scotland, but the whole of the UK for the benefit of the few. Britain is a busted flush. The crash that is coming will wipe out many for the benefit and opportunity of the few. Go and read, listen to Michael Hudson, Richard Wolfe, Richard Murphy. Wake up, folks. We're getting shafted again.
Yeah, Phil also meant to say listen to Through a Scottish Prism as well. No, but that's the thing. I mean, Mr. Ratcliffe is getting 600 million to close his refinery and open one in Belgium. He's getting money for Old Trafford. We couldn't get in for Hampden when we did it. How dare they use our taxpayers' money for a football ground? But here's the other one. You know, they hate socialism, Alan. They also avoid socialism and using other people's monies. They don't mind using our money when it's to help big business like Heathrow, like Ineos, like whoever it is. And here's this, why are they not? Heathrow Airport Holdings is owned by all these different companies, and Qatar Investment Authority, a public investment fund, and the Australian Retirement Trust, the Chinese Investment Corporation. Why aren't they paying for all this? Why are the British taxpayers paying, in effect, doing corporate socialism for a runway for London? Tell me, I don't understand.
Because that's the only way they use socialism. Use socialism, public money, to pay the private sector, while the poor and disabled struggle to live. That's how capitalism works. They tell everyone socialism is bad, but they use it for their own, instead of distributing the wealth right throughout so everyone benefits. But even Rachel Reeves' argument about the investment in Heathrow, because we'll be able to export our whiskey. Guess what, Rachel? The only whiskey that goes on the plane is what you buy at duty free. Whiskey is exported by boat. And the reason that she wants everything put down to Heathrow in England is because the revenue from that is then awarded to England, which is why Gers is just a piece of nonsense. It's a lie. Because when you take things from Scotland down to England and then export it to the nation that's going to be the final destination, those revenues are put down as English exports. What we should be doing is making sure, and this is where John Swinney should be investing, is in runways in Scotland, better docks in Scotland, so that we could do all our exporting and importing from our own country. Let the people of Scotland know exactly how much our country exports and imports, and how much money we actually have coming into this country that is not being awarded falsely to England.
As if we don't have enough excuses or reasons, not excuses, but reasons either to get out of this accursed union. The latest opinion polling this week has come out showing that the Reform UK have actually hit the front. The spectre of Prime Minister Farage looms over us, because people seem to think that this is he's the last white hope, that he's one of them, one of the workers. He's the answer, because they've lost all faith in all the other political parties. So let's give them a shot. It's insanity, but it's scary insanity.
He's having the same degree of success there as he had in relation to his Brexit campaign. You know, it was only a slogan. I think it was Lloyd that said that the other week here. It was a slogan with no substance behind it, but everybody fell for it, other than obviously the majority of the people of Scotland. And what was the SNP reaction? Remember, they stuck it on the side of a bus, stop Brexit. But between then and now, as we've watched the rise of Farage and Reform, the SNP have sat on their hands. And I was reminded of the queues. Remember the queues of lorries that were travelling from Scotland down to Dover to export shellfish, Scottish shellfish, that was delayed and ruined. Cargoes were ruined. And I'm at that point, which was 4 years ago, I'm watching the telly thinking, why the bloody hell is Scottish shellfish being exported through Dover? Why is it not going on a ferry from Rosyth to the continent? Why is it that ferry doesn't run anymore? Douglas Chapman worked very hard to try to get it reinstated, but why hasn't it been reinstated? Very simply, 2 reasons. One is that, as Alan has said, the Scottish produce exported from Scotland would be shown as a Scottish asset, Scottish returns, a balance of payments for Scotland that was in credit. And the other reason is, if there's a ferry that goes from Scotland to Europe, then there's a ferry comes back from Europe to Scotland, and it doesn't have to travel through England, and people can visit Scotland without having to make a bypass or a detour elsewhere, and there's more money lands in Scotland to be spent in Scotland. And this is what we need. We need to behave as if we're living in the early days of a better nation. We need to be the nation that we were hundreds of years ago, when people, including the likes of Sir William Wallace, travelled to Europe from Scotland directly in boats that left the east coast of Scotland and landed in the European countries where they went to university, where they made connections, where they made diplomatic connections, where they got to know the movers and the shakers elsewhere in this small part of the world. That is what we need to do, and we need to start it today. John Swinney has absolutely no reason not to say, get the barricades up, man them now, let's all arrive in Rosyth or Leith or Inverkeithing or wherever the hell you want on the East Coast and talk seriously about reconnecting with our European neighbours and dealing and trading with them directly, promoting Scottish produce at every turn and keeping the money and the revenue here in Scotland and attracting Europeans to land in Scotland as their first port and their first destination, spend their money here and welcome them here, because that's the kind of innovative thinking that is needed. Otherwise, we will go down the dark road that reform takes us to, and that is not a place that Scotland wants to be in.
No, the clock's beginning to beat us, Lloyd. There's a couple of things I really want to talk about, but we can't let that thing about reform go by. It's quite worrying, isn't it?
It's worrying if you accept the mainstream media narrative. And the main reason that we've got the mainstream media narrative at the moment is not some great conspiracy. It's very simple. Politics is showbiz in Britain and has been for 20, maybe 30 years. And at the moment, you've got Ed Davey, the blandest of the bland. You've got Starmer, the robot. You've got Kemi Badenoch, who's not quite got her feet under the table yet. And then you've got Farage and Tice. Now, if you're a television producer, it's really straightforward. Who's got the charisma? Who's got the style? Who's going to say something controversial? Who's going to shake the programme up a bit? It's Farage and Tice. Farage's whole career has been built on the fact that he can go on television and say something provocative from the right. And he's allowed to do that because most people who work in television and the mainstream media come from the middle class, usually from, certainly at the BBC and ITV, from Oxbridge universities, and have a natural empathy with some of the things that Farage and Tice say. Whether they would admit to having that empathy or not is another matter, but they do. Now, we've been given the idea that this is a movement. It's a political movement with a political ideology. It's not. It's a business that has some certain ideas about moving business through politics. But, you know, have no illusions about this. Farage and Tice and Reform are very much a product of the blandness of our own political leaders. And I would say that the real, you know, the wake-up call for John Swinney is, John, you're very firmly in the same gang as Ed Davey and Mr. Starmer. You're the blandest of the bland. People don't even listen to you anymore. That's what I got told at the football yesterday. It comes on, the words start, and nobody listens. They just switch off. Now, we've known that for years. We knew it back in 2002. In 2003 and then in 2004 when you got the boot the first time. Reform are a fear at the moment because they're the only game of entertainment in town. Everybody else is boring, right? So that's why they get on the telly and that's why they're rising, because they say things that nobody else would say. But as has been said many times before, a week is a long time in politics. The 2026 election in Scotland, I do not believe we'll see the return of reform in the same manner in which it is. And also any suggestions of what they might achieve at a general election at Westminster is very far in the future. The last thing that Starmer and Rachel from Accounts want is an election anytime soon, because they know that they're on the bum's rush. So in reality, general election projections are of little or no importance at this stage in the electoral cycle. We have to worry about 2026, but we don't have to worry about reform if there's a genuine campaign for independence, because the only reform, and I know you've been using this, Neil Hanvey, the only reform that we require in Scotland is independence. That's the reform. I got a cheer for the bairns there.
Yeah, my granddaughter's just appeared. Yep. Yeah, not far. Phil, he's back in the room. Phil, trying to get my composure back here. In reform, I wonder if the British would stoop to the levels that's happening in Germany. The AFD party, which is referred to as extreme right, but anything that the neoliberals don't like, they call extreme right, they're now threatening to ban them from standing for election for the Bundestag. And we saw the EU didn't like the election of the president in Romania, and they got that election annulled. It really is beginning to wonder, do we live in democracies in Western Europe, or are we in fact in kleptocracies?
Currently, we do not live in a democracy in Europe, and the European Union has been hijacked, as the British Parliament and British government and British unionist parties have, as have the SNP. The powers that be are very influential, and the German Parliament, for those that are not aware of this, they discussed banning AfD, which is alleged far-right, anti-EU, and very pro, and this is key, resuming relations with Russia from elections, because you mentioned the Romanian president had vote cancelled because he was too pro-Russian. You know, and you know, if you're not supporting genocide in Parliament in Palestine and want a continuation of this disgusting war that's a proxy war by the West in Ukraine, then you're the baddie apparently. And this is the Germany's Bundestag debating banning the far-right AfD party. It was a cross-party group of 124 MPs putting in a motion because there was an unprecedented alliance between the CDU, I think the Christian Democrats, and this AfD, and they've put it before the Federal Constitutional Court to ban the party. This is not democracy. Also, there's a distinct advantage in keeping these people in plain sight, the far right and the far left. You do not want to force them underground. But the overriding principle for me is freedom of speech, the right with which we protect all other rights. We really need to allow people to speak. Then you know what you're thinking. And this ties in, I mean, and the whole Russian thing. Remember we talked about the 80th anniversary liberation of Auschwitz that the Russians liberated, and they're not invited. Russia should be our ally, not our enemy. Europe needs to wrestle its future as Britain needs to do it. And all I'm concerned about Scotland putting our own house in order first and wrestling our future from the hands of the shysters currently in control to put Europe back on a European footing that more properly reflects the will of all the people. The clowns currently in control are not democratic. They're forcing the people to rebel and go to the extremes in politics. And that's where the dangers lies. The extreme left and the extreme right are not the answer for a civilized society.
No. On that, because the clock's beating us, Alan, but it was touched on by Phil, the 80th anniversary this week of the liberation of the Auschwitz-Birkenau camp by the Soviet Union. The German, ironically, they banned the Russians who liberated the camp and invited the Germans, and over and above that, they also invited Benjamin Netanyahu, who just carried out a genocide. The hypocrisy and absolutely the lunacy of the neoliberals who run Western Europe, it's quite out of hand.
This is the problem we have right throughout the world. The neoliberals, the extreme right, are destroying countries, destroying memories of history. They're using a squirrel to throw that way to distract you while they're doing other things to destroy you. Banning organisations doesn't work. Because, like Phil said, they go underground and you can't see them. I mean, I know a lot of elections where political opponents have refused to join in debates with the far right. I don't. I go right to the debate and I out-debate them. I call them out for what they are. I make sure that people see them for what they are. Because it is their ideas that are in place now that is destroying the country. It's not the foreigners. It's not the elderly. It's not the unemployed. It's not the workers, it's the politicians being incompetent at their job and looking after their friends from the rich backgrounds, filling up their wallets. But on the commemorative of Auschwitz, do they not look back at history? This wasn't just about Jews being murdered. This was about workers being murdered, socialists being murdered, communists being murdered, LGBT, in particular gay men, being murdered. Gypsies being murdered. It was genocide of a lot more people than just one faith. And it's time people remember that. Why should only one section be remembered from this historical catastrophe? Everybody that was murdered by these Nazis should be remembered and never, ever forgotten.
No, and the people who liberated the camp should have been given the honour of being at that, whether you agree with them today or politically or not. And as to debating the far right, I am willing to do that on here. I will happily debate people of the far right, British Labour Party, British Conservative Party or British Liberal Party, anytime they want to come on here. It's an open invitation. None of them ever take it up. But ladies and gentlemen, the clock's beating us. In fact, Techie will be going crazy because we've recorded this just before it's meant to go out, and she's got to do all sorts of magic tricks before it goes out. So I'll have to finish it there. I hope you've enjoyed this as much as we've enjoyed chatting to you. And until we see you and yours, take care.
Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.